I'm sending my baby into the world and like, you know, admire, right? And then 5 orders.
Do you like to think I put in a day's worth of effort, I get a day's worth of result? But the internet doesn't work that way. Find the best leaf you can, make it simply. You really don't have to do a whole lot else. Hello everybody, welcome to Tea Time with Jesse. I am here today with my very good friend, Thomas Talhelm.
Hi everybody.
If you want to give everybody a brief introduction to yourself and who you are.
So yeah, my name is Thomas Talhelm. I am an associate professor of behavioral science. I'm at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, but don't let that fool you into thinking that I know anything about business, despite also having a company. Behavioral science is a fancy way of saying mostly psychology, but I study culture, so I consider myself a cultural psychologist.
Nice.
I've lived in China for 7 years, speak Chinese. Got into tea while I was in China, so we can talk a little bit about that. Researched cultural psychology and started an air purifier social enterprise.
We're going to drink this baozhong tea from Taiwan. This is a tea that I got while I was in Pinglin, which is a city. It's amazing. It's only half an hour from Taipei, but it's like because they drill a tunnel through like a mountain, they get into like a mountain climate. So even though it's really close to Taipei, they have tea farms there.
That's cool.
And it's a really cool thing. So I got this tea, and I think that you will enjoy it. This is an oolong that's so light, it's kind of like a green tea.
That's right.
And so they drink this first steep for sure. So we're gonna give a tiny bit here to our tea pets just because everybody on the internet yells at me if I don't. And we'll pour for you here.
Great.
So it's good to be able to have my old China friends back over for tea. The world has led us to many different places, and now you're in LA.
Yeah.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
I took a smell later, or a bit earlier, and it's so fragrant.
Yeah, the fragrance is really, really nice.
That's one of the things with the oolongs. It's like it's a bouquet. It's not sickeningly. It's not too flowery or anything, but
you smell here.
It's great.
That's nice.
Actually, oolong was the first. Thinking back to what really got me into tea, this was it.
Yeah, oolong, like light oolongs.
When I first was at the tea houses and like slowly getting used to it. This was the thing where I was like, oh, I can get into that.
Yeah.
So
and oolong has this it's got this light, fresh, clean flavor, but also it's got the huigan, the aftertaste. That's like the thing that really separates the good teas from the bad teas. I find is like a lot of them will taste good going down, but if you have a really good quality tea, you kind of get this sweet aftertaste. It kind of just like comes back. It comes back. It's the thing to drink. Like I like the mentality that they take towards tea and. Which is like find the best leaf you can, make it simply. And if you have good tea, you really don't have to do a whole lot else.
That's it.
That's basically it. And so this is why a lot of people ask me like, oh, can you have like honey or sugar in the tea? And it's like, there's no, like if you're going to go and find the good tea, there's not really a point in doing that because it kind of does it by itself. It has that flavor in it.
Yeah.
So cheers. So very cool. So we both met originally on the Fulbright Fellowship.
That's right.
Fulbright, for people who don't know, it's like a State Department program where American scholars go to different countries to study, and then those countries send scholars to America. It's like academic exchange. And so I researched Chinese comedy and xiangsheng. And what was your research on?
Yeah, so I researched cultural psychology at the time. I was a PhD student at the University of Virginia. And my big idea that I was working on at the time was cultural differences within China. Yeah, I was a researcher in cultural psychology. People talk about East-West differences all the time. China and Japan are like this, and US and Germany, France are like that. But I had lived enough in China by that point to go like, wait a second, there's a lot of differences within China. And I'm not even talking about the far-flung, Tibet is very different. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about even just East Coast.
Within Han Chinese, because that was the thing. It's like in the comedy clubs, this is very obvious. Because in the comedy clubs, like half of a Chinese comedy show is like people making fun of other provinces and how they act.
Right.
Or like Northerners being like, 北方人都这样子, 南方人都这样子, and like, this province, these people, urban, rural, all of these things that you don't even need to get into different ethnicities within China. There's a lot of...
there's so much richness there.
So much richness. And so this was, I guess, like, you felt like a good area for research. You're like, oh, it's very different. Why aren't people talking about it?
Yeah. It was completely empty in cultural psychology. There
Really?
was not a cultural psychology of differences within China.
That's fascinating.
I was a freelance journalist for a year. and I took classes at the Beijing Language and Culture University.
Yep, BLCU. Also, I spent 2 months there.
So we're in this class on dialects, and at one point, our teacher is telling us about some minor difference in Chinese. It's the character shou, it means hand. If you look in the dictionary, it means hand. But our teacher said, in some parts of China, it can refer to the whole arm. So like if you got hit with a ball here, you might say, oh, my shou.
打到手了, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was shou, shou
Yeah,
chang了.
yeah.
And so he was showing us a map of like people went around China. Where is it only hand and where is it also sometimes arm? And he showed us this map of China with like, I don't know if it's like red dots and blue dots or something like that. And the difference split almost perfectly on the Yangtze River.
Really?
So it's like north of the Yangtze River, only hand. South of the Yangtze River also could mean arm.
Yeah.
And I think the other students in the class, there's probably like 15 kids, master's students. They were probably like, yeah, whatever, okay, next.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, my mind is on fire. Like my mind's spinning because I've been thinking about these cultural differences for so many years, maybe 3-4 years at that point. And it's the brain is hard to measure, culture is hard to measure, but where people are speaking the same,
you kind of have now you have an in.
That's an in, right? It'd be weird if culture was this way and language was that way, right?
Yeah.
Like they should fall on the same lines or close, right? And so I was like, well, whatever that line is, that must be the key. These differences that I've been living, and a lot of people have been living in China, it probably falls along the lines of whatever that is. And so I'm sitting there in that class, and I really had the sense that at that moment, like my life had changed. I knew that I had to figure out what that line represented historically. And so at first I was like, oh, is it like a border? I mean, in a coarse way, like why is India so different from China? It's like, well, there's mountains in the way, right? So that's why the cultures are so different. But really, the Yangtze River is, for Americans, it's kind of like the Mississippi. It's not that.
You can get over it. It's not the Himalayas.
Yeah, it's not the Himalayas. It's not a hard river to get over.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it wasn't, dividing. It wasn't keeping people out.
Yeah.
And so it must have been something different. And so I had that idea on my head, and I learned in the months after that, that's pretty much the rice-wheat dividing line in China. So Yangtze River in south is rice. North is wheat and other crops like millet and later corn and soybeans, stuff like that. And so that was really the moment where I was like, oh, okay, that's probably where these cultural differences are coming from. Because I want to document not just that there are differences. I mean, that's what psychologists do. We can test people and show that
it's more interesting if you have a theory for why the differences exist in the first place.
That was sort of my whole thing. I felt like cultural psychology had done a lot of documenting differences. I wanted to get a little bit deeper and go, okay, where do these differences come from? And to me, the thing that people have been doing for thousands of years, that's a good place to start. Like, where would culture come from? Oh, well, 90% of people were doing this. You were farming rice, you were farming wheat. Almost everybody in a village would be doing this thousands of years. Seems like a good place to start, right? Would it be should we go look in ancient books and stuff like that? Books that most people weren't reading? Like, I don't know. So I started looking into the anthropology of, okay, what was it like to be in a rice village? How did people farm rice? How did people farm wheat? And could that be related to cultural differences? And it was like everything that I read about rice farming was like, oh, that makes complete sense with life in southern China now.
Can you give an example? Like
One example is that like rice depends on irrigation networks. So you have like a river, and then you divert the river, and then that adds water to the fields of the different farmers. In contrast, wheat relies on rainfall. So like we're just there, it rains, and okay. You can imagine that having this system that we manage together requires us to coordinate our behavior, right? How much water I use affects how much water you can use. In a lot of these systems, I can't personally decide when to flood or drain the fields. I forgot to mention that rice grows in standing water, so you're like flooding the fields. I can't, as a single farmer, decide because it's a shared system. And so even if I think today's the best day to flood the field, if everybody around me disagrees, I just have to do the thing that everybody else wants.
Or you get ostracized because you flooded the field for everybody when it was good for you.
Exactly. Your behavior has a lot of those consequences towards other people. And so I call it coordination. Like I think coordination is a key element of rice farming that, it's not to say that wheat farming had no coordination, but it's much less so than in rice farming. And so, okay, think of that coordination having to depend on other people in rice farming. And then think of like my life in Guangzhou where it's like, oh, people would, if they had a thought that they thought might offend me, maybe not say that.
Yeah, like this is not helping coordination to just make people angry.
This could rock the boat.
Yeah.
How
do you deal with the fact that people seem so sure about what their culture is, and yet nobody's done that serious research about it and had the numbers? Do you just think that like we're walking around with like mostly inaccurate guesses about what our culture is like, and or are we actually better at this than we think?
Yeah, I'm on the team that people are generally more accurate than at least than researchers like to think.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite pastimes in China is like if I'm on a train, let's say going from Beijing to Shanghai.
Yep.
Chances are the person sitting next to me has spent time in both cities. And so then I'll say, what do you think? Like, oh, you're from the South? What do you think of people in the North? Oh, you're from the North? What do you think of people in the South? And that sort of informal impressions of the culture.
Yeah.
I find people
they're generally pretty accurate.
They know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And how much of that is stereotype, how much of that is their own personal experience. But I would say they broadly agree. The one area where they really disagree is 礼貌. Who's polite and who's impolite. So they all agree that Northerners are more outgoing, talkative, gregarious, and Southerners are sort of shy and like holding things in, introverted. But both sides think that the other side is impolite.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's because, well, what does polite mean?
What is polite?
Right?
Well, this is a sort of thing. It's like, for instance, like if you, as you said with the tea, somebody's pouring you tea. That's their way of being polite. If your glass is empty, I've already failed. Really, I should be refilling it here, even in your hand, before you run out. Because to me, as a tea person, that's my way of being polite. But if you were, let's say that you were somebody who's like, I don't want to drink that much caffeine or whatever. You just had this in your head that you didn't want to keep drinking. Like, the correct way to do that, potentially in Chinese culture, is literally to turn the cup over.
Yes.
Now, like, I have given you such a clear clue that I do not want to drink any more tea by turning this cup over. But, like, somebody might see, like, that's really rude.
I think that's a great example of that. I learned this years ago in China. I don't think that there's a good way to translate the word offer in English into Chinese. Or another example is the word rang in Chinese.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means to make somebody do something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it means to let somebody do something.
Yeah.
Which I think to an American is crazy that those are the same words.
Yeah.
Because the autonomy of the other person is really critical in English. Do you want to do this or do you not want to do this? But that word rang in Chinese, it ignores whether you want to do this or not, right?
Yeah.
And what is offer, right? Offer is also like, I will present this to you.
Yeah.
Do you want it or not?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the weird thing in Chinese is that, why is that concept weird in Chinese? Because you give, right? And giving is not an autonomous thing, right? I give something to you.
If you were required to give it, it would be a service. It's not a gift.
Exactly.
We're running out of time in this first half. We're about to take a little bit of a break. But again, thanks, Thomas, for coming. We're going to be back in just a moment drinking another tea. And I'll see you in just a moment. I'm Jesse.
I'm Thomas.
And we'll see you soon.
Hello, tea friends. Jesse here. I'm actually back at my parents' house in Boston right now, finishing up the episode. Hope you guys are enjoying this talk with Thomas. Super interesting stuff. The second half is coming right up, but don't forget, we have the full episode available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want to hear an hour of my conversation with Thomas, it's really great. Good thing for tea. Also, don't forget, we have a special code, Thomas10. Insert Thomas10 in your order and you will get 10% off that whole order. It's just for you guys on the podcast right now. Don't forget it. Let's get back to the episode. See you there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tea Time with Jesse. I am Jesse, here with Thomas Talhelm.
Hi, everybody.
Cultural expert, professor, Chinese speaker, and also man who takes dirty air and makes it less dirty. We'll get through that, but before we do that, we're going to start to have the second tea. Nice. I asked Thomas what he wanted. He said he hadn't had any good pu-erh in a while, and so I figured I would make you the 2010. This is my friend Dui Dui's 2010 Reserve show pu-erh tea. Very, very nice. A little bit of a steep. First wash. For the aged pu-erh, I usually do a wash and kind of get a chance to try that smell. Isn't that good?
Very rich. Yeah.
Yes, very rich. The this is like a very very like powerful, like dark, rich tea. The cooked pu-erh taste is not to everybody's flavor.
Feed the animals.
Yeah, gotta get the animals, especially now that we have the pu-erh here. You can pour on whichever animals you would like. This is Chonky Horse.
Okay.
And that's Pendor.
He is kind of chunky.
Yeah, Chonky. He's thick. Look at that, good boy.
I was gonna say this pu-erh totally makes sense to do second.
Yeah.
When you suggested that, like, yeah, you don't want to start with a pu-erh and then move to something like.
Sometimes people ask, like, how do you, if you're doing multiple teas in a day, or if you have friends over and you want to try, like, we have an 8 tea sampler. So like, you get 8 different teas. If you have your friends come over, you should try 2, 3, 4 different teas. Like, give them a try. I generally like going from lighter to darker.
Yeah.
And then, like, from sweeter to more complex or rich.
Yeah. I would describe this as like earthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that can sound bad, but like, no, it's pleasant.
It's like a pleasant earthiness. Once you know it's going to taste different than other tea you've had before, then you're kind of like there for it, and it's very warming to the stomach. So this is what I drink if I have like stomach problems.
Pu-erh just seems like a good after meal tea to me. In a way that a green tea, I just like not.
Yep.
This
is also like, if you go to a lot of dim sum restaurants, they serve really weak pu-erh. Partially because they're just re-steeping it the whole time. They're not making, it's not a tea house. They're not making it for the tea to be amazing. But for whatever reason, weak pu-erh, I feel, goes really well with dim sum. Maybe it's just that I have a lot of positive memories of eating dim sum and drinking that tea. But it's like, it has enough flavor that it's not water. But it's also, when it's weak like that, it's not trying to overwhelm the flavor of the food.
Yeah.
When you make it like this, you're having it for tea. So it is rich. What do you think of that?
Yeah, this is really good. It's really strong, very full-bodied. Yeah, there's nothing weak about this.
Very smooth. Getting back into smart air. So, so basically, for those that don't know, the air pollution is a big problem in Beijing. Not just in Beijing, but really like a lot of places around the world. I think people don't necessarily recognize how much stuff there is in the air.
That's right.
And so, like, how did the idea to like do air purifiers start?
Also on the Fulbright. So we were there 2012, 2013. Beijing has had an air pollution problem for a while, but I want to say it was January 2013, it got so bad that it was in news.
The fell winter of 2012. I remember this. We hit 500 AQI regularly. On the reg, there was a brewery called Jing-A, which had a beer called Airpocalypse. And they would discount the beer if the air pollution was really bad because no one was going out to the bar. Because you would walk outside, you would inhale, you get headaches. You just couldn't see anything.
I kept thinking I was getting colds. Be like, oh, I got a sore throat, I'm coughing. But then I'd have it for a few days, and then it would get better, and then I'd have it again, and then it would get better. And then eventually I was like, I don't think this is a cold. Like, this is something different. And then, the airpocalypse happened. And I went out to buy an air purifier, and the one that everybody was buying back in the day, I don't know if you were aware of this or remember this, the IQ-Air was the one that everybody bought. It cost like $1,000.
They were really expensive, and it was and they were big,
huge,
and it was definitely made. Like air purifiers back then had the feel of a luxury item. It's like if you went into a place and they wanted to impress you about how much money they had, they would have an air purifier running. Because it's like, only us get to have the nice air.
Yeah.
So you didn't want to spend $1,000 on an air purifier.
And it just something seemed wrong about it to me. Like, you don't know what's in there and how they work, right? Like
It's literally a magic box.
It's a magic box. You push the button, clean air comes out, right? But I was like, I just don't think that there's something in there that costs $1,000. And so I did research, and by research, it pretty much starts and ends on the Wikipedia page. There's a thing in there called a HEPA filter, HEPA. It's just a mat of like polyester fibers, essentially. So if you have like a sports shirt, like some stretchy fabric, same thing, right? If you have like a sponge or something, it's made out of that same sort of fabric, just plastic fibers. These were invented in the 1940s.
Really?
They've been around for 70 years. Yeah.
What were they filtering at that time?
So they were actually developed in the Manhattan Project. So when they were developing the atomic bomb, they were concerned, like, wait a second, what if there are atomic, radioactive particles in the air?
We want to catch them.
Yeah, and so they developed these filters. That's the technology. So what that means is they're not patented, right? Also, it's a mature technology, so lots of
Yeah.
people have had, time to develop these. And I was like, wait a second, I bet people are making these HEPA filters in China. And so I went on to Taobao, which is like the
Yeah.
eBay of China, and found a HEPA filter for like 110 RMB, so like $18
Yeah.
maybe. And I had a fan at home,
Mm-hmm.
and so I just strapped the HEPA filter once it came to a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was the first do-it-yourself,
Yeah.
DIY air purifier that I ever made.
Yeah.
As a PhD student at the time, there's that part of me that's like, I want data on this. I want to test it. I also wanted to know is it getting the really, really small particles? Because there's larger particles, and then there's the small ones that
Yeah.
can like really penetrate deep
Yep.
into the lungs. So I went out and I bought a laser particle counter. So this is a machine, it's a box with it samples air, and then it's got a laser inside to detect the really small particles. That thing cost me over $300. So just for reference, the purifier itself is like $30
Yeah.
maybe, and the laser particle counter is like $300. So it cost me more to test it than it did to build it. But it gave me the data, and it gave me knowledge. I was buying knowledge, right?
Yep.
And so I did tests, and it showed like, yes, even the small particles, it was capturing those. And then, it was getting my room down, like 80, 90% reductions in these small particles.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't use this homemade purifier in your own home, or you use this for a month and then you go out and buy another one, at least now I've equipped you with the knowledge to know that you don't need to spend $1,000 on this.
So you started doing this and you started building it, and was there a market?
So it's one of those funny things where like the first week we started the website, my friend Gus was helping me do it. And I was just holding myself back because I wanted to ask him every day, how many orders did we get? How many orders did we get? And at the end of the first week, I think it was like 5.
Okay.
And one of those was yours.
Was it? Was I one of the first 5?
You were one of the first.
Oh, there we go. I felt I was late on the train. I was like this, it turns out I wasn't.
Yeah,
Excellent.
you were early.
Excellent.
And so first week, it's this gap between like, I'm sending my baby into the world and admire, right? And then 5 orders. But then within a few weeks, it just snowballed. And soon enough, it was like December in Shanghai. Shanghai got hit with really bad air pollution. And then we were just buried under orders. We had so many more orders than we had time to like ship everything and pack everything together.
Yeah.
There were days, so by this point, I'm back in Virginia doing my PhD, have to work on my dissertation. There were days I would bike into the office, answer Smart Air emails all day, get back on my bike and bike home. I didn't work on my dissertation or anything that I was supposed to be working on, just because Smart Air was taking off.
And I mean, I've gone through moments of having that similar sort of craziness with the tea company. Like, it's weird because as humans, you like to think I put in a day's worth of effort, I get a day's worth of result, but the internet doesn't work that way.
No.
The internet is like, if it goes viral, you get like a year's worth of stuff in like 3 days, and then it goes away. And then it's very difficult to plan.
It's
like
impossible,
when you do that sort of thing. So how did you deal with that growth, and where did it go?
Doing Smart Air really taught me, like, we cannot, at our price point, eat the cost of advertising. That only works if you're really ripping people off.
People don't appreciate how expensive that online advertising is,
It really
but
is.
also it's because they have very complicated computer systems designed to make sure there's no benefit to the ad. The moment they realize the ad is working, it gets more expensive. Completely unsolicited advice for everybody out there, but I think you'd agree. It's like by making a good product and then sharing it in a story that people actually understand. That's like a far better use of your time than like raising money to go and give to Google. For to do ads.
I mean, that's what. So I founded Smart Air. I call it a social enterprise. So it's not the goal for me is not to make money. I wanted to solve a problem out there of helping people breathe clean air and educating people. I mean, you can go to our website right now. I will teach you how to build an air purifier, and that doesn't require you buying anything from me. My instructions don't involve you buying anything from me. And to me, that's a win, right? And I think there's a way to make that work as a company. And so I think the people who buy Smart Air purifiers are people who like the fact that we are open about what we're doing. We put our data online. We say, you know, hey, here's another way to do it if you want to do it. I don't ask people to trust me. I say, trust the data, trust the science. We put it all out there.
Yeah. And by the way, we're not sponsored by pur-erh. Like, I'm not making any money by sharing pur-erh. Like, it really is like, I love that data-driven way of doing things, because just like with the culture, like, you know, we run into this problem with the tea. People will be like, if we say we have Chinese tea, some people on the internet will be like, it must be polluted. And then the same people apparently have no worries about Japanese tea, but like, it's not coming from data in either sense. Like, there is assuredly some tea in China. Believe me, I've tried some of it that's like so heavy with pesticide, you taste it when it's swimming in the water. But like, it doesn't mean inherently that because it's from China, it's polluted, or because it's from Japan, it's pure, or something like that. It's not based off of data, and I would just love for more of the discourse around, like, whether it's culture and this is both culture and public health, to be based off of like reality, or at least an attempt to find reality. You know, it was one of the things that I really loved to see. Like, you actually even if it wasn't a perfect scientific experiment, you had like experiments. You also had graphs, which is really important. People, if you want to convince people of things, have graphs. So everybody asked me, what type of water is the best water to make tea with? And because you're a data guy, you actually tested this. So tell me about your water data test, and then I can refer everybody else from now on to this video.
Cool. Yes. So this is all based on my experience going to the tea shops in China, going to Tea City in Beijing. You and I have both been there. I get these green teas. I get these Longjing, dragon well, and I taste them in the tea stall, and be like, oh, this is an amazing tea. Then I take it back to Chicago, you know, start drinking it at home, and be like, this is just not as good. And like, what is, I loved this in the tea shop, and now it's, you know, the suspicious side of me is like, oh, they're switching out the tea. You know, they're giving me the good ones, and then they switch, you know, but it's like, no, that's not it.
But again, without information, you start thinking you're getting tricked. And it's like, that's a human thing. It just happens.
Totally human.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think I was traveling, I bought water at the store for some reason, and I was like, holy cow, this water is really good, or this tea is really good. Yeah. And I was like, I think it was the water. And so I started doing tests. And as the psychologist, I know like, people are biased. If you believe something works, you're gonna think it tastes better or whatever. So I started doing blind taste tests. And so I started at home. I would literally, like, you know, blind, not looking at this. I test, so tap water. I do like Brita water, so like a
home
simple
filter.
a simple filter. And then the third one that I'd use is either, first it was distilled water from the store, so like a jug of distilled water. And then later I got a reverse osmosis system in my home because of these tests. I'd have people over at my house and say, let's do the experiment. Have them all out, again, them blindfolded. It's immediately obvious. The distilled water or the RO, the reverse osmosis water, hands down the best. Really? Right? That experiment has never failed. And you can even see it in the color. So if you do a green tea, I don't know how it necessarily would work with a darker tea. And by the way, I think with a pu-erh, this probably wouldn't matter. But with a tea where the flavor is more delicate, so if you have like an Earl Grey, whatever, it's so strong.
So that's anything where the water, like that first tea we had with the word they say in Mandarin, tian shui, like, you know, sweet water, like, you know, that's the, if it's got that sweet water taste, it'll definitely work better from the thing. My really janky version of this test was I actually, in the last summer, I went to the Smoky Mountains, and the Airbnb we had, the tap water was very sulfurous. Like, it was very sulfurous. It was safe to drink, I'm sure, but it smelled bad. And then so when we were hiking in the woods, they had this small stream, and I remember that Lu Yu, and the real tea heads know Lu Yu. Lu Yu said the best source for tea water is a swiftly moving mountain stream from the middle where there's no sediment collected. And so I had an empty Gatorade bottle, and I filled it up with river water and boiled it for 5 minutes or whatever to make sure it wasn't going to kill me. And it was much better. It was clearly better than what came out of the tap. And I think that you know, the water quality really can affect the quality of the tea. Right before we finish, I want to be able to do just like a little bit of a lightning round.
Sure.
So I'm going to give you just quick questions and then like very short answers. You know?
Let's do it.
All right. Very cool. First question. What was your favorite tea to drink when you were in China?
Definitely Dragon Well, so Longjing.
All right, very cool. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to get started in cultural studies?
Ooh, I would say spend a lot of time in another culture and ideally learn the language if you're in it for the long run.
Very cool. What advice do you give to people who are interested in getting into like data studies?
Ooh, find a question that you're interested in. So for me, it was like air purifiers or the tea, water in the tea, stuff like that. Differences in China. Find a question that you're interested in, and then just start doing it citizen science style.
Nice. If you could give one piece of advice for people about your own tea journey, about how to continue on their tea journey, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say, if you can ever go and sit in something like this and try different teas, that's been one of the most fun things for me, is like going to Tea City, and there are places like that in the US where you can do this. Try different types of a Dragon Well, right? Obviously, there's all the different, there's the pu-erh and the green, but like try, 5 types of the green, and that sort of experience will really teach you a lot. You can learn a lot in an afternoon, and your enjoyment will just increase from there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if I don't know if you're a big social media guy. You want to give people how to follow you on the internet?
A little bit. Probably the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. So I'm at Thomas Talhelm, so my name.
Great.
And if you Google me, you'd probably find your way there.
For those of you who have been watching, thanks again for watching. You're the real ones if you kept all the way to the end of the podcast. If you want any of the teas that we drank today, or any of the tea equipment, or any of the tea pets that are on the table, our Brewista iridescent unicorn kettles, all this stuff is on the website. Aren't they nice?
Yeah, that's great.
All that stuff is on the website, and as we kind of talked about it earlier, it's like, the reason that we get to do this is because we hope a portion of you who are trying to get into tea will go to the website, try the tea, try the stuff, try the subscription. We have our new subscription teas that are out right now. That's the easiest way to get a good amount of tea at a really good price. 3 different flavors every cycle. You can get the individual box or subscribe, or we have our 8 tea samplers that are back in stock. So to your idea of trying the multiple types of tea, that's why we make 8 teas in the sampler, so that you can try out all the different flavors. And it's just been really great to hang out with you, and best of luck on all your future cultural research. And we should do some sort of comedy show where like we take some sort of cultural insight from your thing and I jokeify it somehow.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling like it really did feel like they were coming from the same place. So very cool. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm Jesse.
I'm Thomas.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.